Good evening and welcome to Zion's Banner. Let me get everything together here. We have a very special broadcast. So I'm just making sure that the feedback doesn't create a problem. Oh, Jimmy, I'm glad you're here. I don't know if you guys are hearing an echo or not. So no audio. I should have audio. But we're going to have to deal with that. No sound. Okay. I'm stuck with the camera acting as an echo. So that's going to be distracting to me. But if you guys don't hear an echo, that's fine. That's just a function of the camera. Do you guys hear an echo? Just need to be sure. Just give me, all sounds good. Thank you. Hey, it is good to see HN Hand here and Greg Olson. I'm going to pull this off because the echo really, really bothers me. It's just something with me. Now I can't hear you. That's interesting. Nope. Okay. Nope, you can't hear me or no echo. Okay. I'm going to pull this off and see. Can you guys hear me okay now? Probably you're having problems with it, right? Okay, now we should be good. All right. If there's an echo, let me know. The placement of the mics here is a little tricky. Okay, let's just get going. This is exciting to have so many people here. Okay, I'm checking the sound here because I'm getting that there's no sound. So do you realize there's a time delay? Okay. If you don't hear sound, we're going to maybe wink in and out. Let me start introducing you to the Seder. This is a Haggadah. It comes from the Hebrew word that has the idea of to tell. And Jewish people in Jesus' day didn't need one because they weren't dispersed. And so that's basically, you may have problems on your end too. So just kind of bear with it. As long as YouTube is getting the sound, it may just be a matter of you guys kind of hanging out and checking it out. Okay. I am sure that YouTube is indeed giving me sound. So this is a Haggadah. Jesus didn't need one. The Jews weren't dispersed. But when the Jews became dispersed, there was a need to go ahead and actually have a way of standardizing this. This is what the dispersion did. This is my own personal Haggadah. I wrote this after about 15 years of doing these, even before I joined Chosen People. I'm in the process of formatting it and revising it so that I can make it available to people. So stay tuned. It's actually at some point going to hit Amazon and hopefully at some point be available to some of the Patreon folks at a certain level. So we're going to go ahead and start with this. Now I'm going to be moving between the cameras. And so you have to be aware of things as I move through. Now, the first thing that would normally be done in a modern Jewish home, we're going to look at what Jewish people do today, what happened in the upper room, and how it connects to our faith. So we're going to be covering about 3,000 years in approximately an hour. This is going to be a fast ride, but don't worry. You're always free to go back. And so you're going to cover a lot of ground. Now, the first thing that wouldn't have happened in the upper room probably is having the women light the candles. There were female disciples of Jesus, but none of the gospel accounts seem to indicate that any of them were there. And we see no idea of the candle lighting. Now, the fact that there are not mentioned females in the upper room and Jesus is having dinner with his disciples, all the 12, that indicates to me that this did not take place. Normally, this would take place. And I'm going to switch to camera 2 so that you can see that there's a candelabra there. I'm going to be muting the mic to switch to mic 2. So be aware of that. And I put the other mic on, and you can see the candle that's up there near the Seder plate. That would normally be lit by the woman of the house. That mic back on. See, that's what I'm going to have to do in order to do this tonight. Usually, the blessing would not include Jesus. Everything that I do to keep custom, I have adjusted for New Testament understanding. See, I won't teach something that really violates New Testament truth. And so these Jewish blessings are adapted. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who sent thy Son, Yeshua the Messiah, to be the light of the world and our Paschal Lamb, that through him we might live. Now, that is an altered blessing. Now, the part that will always be the same is, blessed art thou, O Lord our God. But most Jews would never say, who sent thy Son. Roughly between 1 and, at a real high estimate, maybe like 7-8% of Jewish people believe. We are still the minority. So these have been altered. Now, normally it would be natural to bless the children. Now, my children are adult children, and they're out of the way so that Dad could do this special broadcast tonight. We're going to have our Seder meal probably Sunday. Passover starts Saturday night at sunset. So that's our family meal, which we started doing when I wasn't speaking and away from home during Passover. And so normally you bless the children. Now, what's the traditional blessing on the children? May the Lord make you like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah. Why? Because they're the matriarchs of Israel. And so we want our daughters to be spiritually fruitful. And physically fruitful doesn't hurt, because I like grandchildren. The sons are blessed. May the Lord make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. Why Ephraim and Manasseh? Because Joseph was very, very fruitful. Joseph produced 2 sons, and both of those sons received a full share of inheritance. That's why Jacob sets them on his knee and adopts them on each knee, because in the Mid-Eastern world, placing the child on the knee gave you the right to like legally adopt the child. And so Jacob does this so that both Ephraim and Manasseh get a full share. And that's why in your Bible, sometimes you'll see a listing that will add up to 12 tribes, but one of the tribes will be missing. One of those places is in Revelation, where the tribe of Dan is missing from the count, because really it's 11 and 2 half tribes that both get a full share. So that explains something out of your Bible that you may never have thought about before. Now I want to introduce you to the players on the Seder plate. So I'm going to switch to camera 2 here. Turn. I should not be muted now. Thank you, talented homeschoolers. Glad to have you aboard. You should be able to hear me now. Second mic has kicked in. This is Zohar. Again, it reminds Jewish people there used to be a Paschal lamb. There's no Paschal lamb because there's no temple. And so that is terribly important to keep track of. No shedding of blood, no forgiveness of sin. Apologetics is both easy and hard. This is a memorial. It's a memorial every year to Jewish people that they really have no atonement, except they don't see it that way because it's been downplayed. This is not eaten. This is Beitzah. Beitzah appears after the Babylonian captivity. Now, the normal explanation for Beitzah that's usually given is that the Jewish holidays had a second offering that was given. And so this is about the size of a meal offering. Okay, and so that's why Beitzah is there. The interesting thing about Beitzah is that the Babylonians believed that the egg was a symbol of resurrection. I think they thought they were getting the chicken back again. And so this appears around Easter, except that I hear rabbits lay them. I'm just using a little bit of Jewish humor there, but I call it the Babylonian connection. There are 4 cups in the Seder. We will be drinking them. So this was just a preliminary look at the 2 elements that we don't eat. The other elements will be explained during the meal. So you will hear about them. But these cups are very important to the Seder. Now, usually the cup is refilled, but we're not doing that because you guys are going to get to do the cup countdown with me. This is like a big part of the Seder for me personally, and I hope it will be exciting for you because it's a powerful visual. The cups are related to 4 promises in Exodus chapter 6. The meal starts with the first cup. It's called the cup of sanctification. Now, the promise is, I will bring you out. Hotzianu. I will bring you out. And it's actually brought us out if you say Hotzianu. So for the Hebrew folks, Yatsah, and it's in the causative, cause you to go out. And so the first cup is the cup that goes to the promise, I will bring you out. Now, what you're going to see is which out of the 4 possible cups that were available to Jesus that night, Jesus chooses to use. And I believe that the 4-cup system was in play and that this was a Passover Seder. I've got some pastors that like to question that. I think Jesus had an option with 4 cups, and I think he's very deliberate in the cup he chooses. And you will see something really cool through this. The blessing over the cup, and I've got my little yarmulke on. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi borei pri hagafen. I'm thinking bread. Okay? Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, who gives us the fruit of the vine. Now, I didn't spend a lot of time blessing those assembled because I really don't know how many people are going to see this. It is traditional to bless those assembled. I do want to just let you know that the blessing is the shape of the shin. This is the Jewish laying on of hands. This is where Leonard Nimoy got it. We're not doing that tonight because I hope you'll all be blessed, and I hope those who watch it later will be blessed. But many of them I may not get to meet until heaven. And some of you who are wonderful and tune in, I may not get to meet in person until heaven. So I'm just going to let that be, but you now know that the Vulcans got it from the Jews. We have the first cup. The first cup is blessed. You heard it blessed. I'm going to take a little sip of this just to let you know this cup wouldn't be available. I'm drinking it. It would be gone. It would have to be refilled. And then it would be the second cup. So I'm taking a little risk and I'm putting that cup here, reaching as far as I can. Okay. There are now how many cups that Jesus had available to him connected with that meal? And you can go ahead and type in the right answer. And I think somebody's got a little hand up there, with the right number of fingers, but you can see those cups. All right. And so we've got that going. Now, in a Jewish Seder, you're following. You have your own copy of the Haggadah. You're actually following along. All right. And it's not really the first night. So to say the blessing for the first night of Passover would sort of be inappropriate in a sense. But basically, the first blessing of any Jewish holiday is blessed art thou, O Lord our God, who has preserved us and allowed us to get to the season. But we haven't gotten to the season yet. Let me introduce one of the elements that we are going to be using. This is karpas. This is the green leafy vegetable. It's parsley. Now, can you use lettuce? Yes, you can use lettuce, but don't. You can. I'm just saying this is such a good visual because it looks like hyssop. Now, remember, David in Psalm says, wash me with hyssop and I will be clean. Hyssop was associated with the temple sacrifices. And so the other thing I really like about hyssop, not only is it connected with purification in the temple sacrificial system, but it's what they use to put blood on the lentil, that's the cross piece, the lentil, and the doorposts. All right, they did not stick their fingers in the blood and lamb blood finger paint. That's like really bad, disgusting. They dipped the hyssop in the blood and put it on the doorpost and the lentil. All right, now I always tell people if you like the taste of parsley, we have to ruin it. Okay, because you see, the green leafy vegetable is dipped in salt water. Now, if you do this right, the water is real salty. Now, salt is supposed to remind us of tears. God is using the 5 senses to take the children of Israel constantly through the Exodus story, which is a story that pictures their redemption and then and ultimately pictures the greater redemption. So it pictures their redemption, but it points to the greater redemption, which we know in Messiah. And so slavery is just a terrible, horrible thing. And God says in Exodus 12:22, depending on your version, that God saw the affliction of his people that were in Egypt, and he knew their sorrows. And so God is very aware of what we go through. And so tears are the tears of slavery. This is God's 4,000-year-old gospel track, I like to call it, and we're using the senses to remind us of the story and to point to the greater story. So I'm going to dip this in salt water. Okay, and my wife did. I'm going to take a little tiny bite because it doesn't look good when you like eat on TV, right? And so I'm going to take a little bite. You don't want to be chewing forever here. That's not our goal. Now, this is really interesting. There are 2 ceremonial washings that my grandfather used to do. You always have a ceremonial washing before you're touching something that's very important to the story. Think of these as characters in the story. If you're going to touch like a main character here, you don't touch the sacred with dirty hands. Now, you're thinking this has nothing to do with New Testament truth. Oh, yes, it does. Because in Paul's letters to Timothy, in one of those letters, Paul says that he desires men everywhere to pray with clean hands, in a sense, with and he's using terminology that has to be translated, but the idea is that you shouldn't do the sacred with the profane, with dirty hands. Remember that as we talked about Jewish thinking, purity represents moral purity and uncleanness represents moral uncleanness. And I'm not going to wash my hands. I have a lot of electronic equipment here, and a short right now would just be a disaster. But I am going to let you know that this is not what Jesus did anyway. This is where Jesus washed the disciples' feet. So they're expecting him to go over, to take the basin, to wash his hands, and to wipe his hands with the towel that would have been there already. And he doesn't do that. He takes the basin and he takes the towel, but he does something that's absolutely scandalous. As I turn back to camera 1 here and go ahead and mute and unmute. So I'm back at camera 1. Add this. Okay, we're back here. We're unmuted. And Slam ended up giving the right answer there. Sorry, there is no Passover gift card. So I am going to screen share John 13, which is the foot washing. We're going to actually look at this. I'm going to share screen on screen 2, shared. Okay, there's John 13. Because I don't want to take you away from the scriptures, I'm going to increase the size of it because I know it's a little difficult to see. Okay, I'm also going to go to full screen for you. So you can see John. There's John up there. Now, John is not one of the synoptic gospels. But remember that they're expecting him to take the towel, wash his hands, and then just do this. And it says that, he laid aside his garments, took the towel and girded himself. He poured water in a basin, instead of washing his hands. And then he began to wash the disciples' feet. And of course, when he comes to Peter, we know Peter says to him, "Lord, are you washing my feet?" That's terribly Jewish for you're not really going to do this, right? And Jesus says, "What I'm doing now, you don't understand." Which means there's something going on here that is not apparent real easily. And of course, Peter says, "You shall never wash my feet." Now, some versions say, "Lord, you shall never wash my feet." That's ridiculous. If he's your Lord, you're not saying no. And if you're saying no at that moment, you're not really letting him be your Lord. And Jesus ends up answering, "If I do not wash your feet, you have no fellowship with me." The Greek word is koinonia. And then Peter says, "Wash my hands and my, just give me a whole bath." Okay, I mean, that's the Jeff Cran translation here. Okay, just, give me a whole bath. And Jesus says he is already bathed, only needs to wash his feet. You don't need a whole bath. You are clean, but not all of you. Well, wait a minute. Who didn't shower that morning? Well, it's not about showering. The cleanness there is spiritual cleanness. The person he's referring to is Judas, who does not have a kosher heart. He has an unkosher heart. And so that's basically what you have there. And so now I'm going to go back to the webcam here. And we're going to move on to the next part because we're following along in the Haggadah. You know, I have to follow along in the Haggadah. So I'm going to go ahead and decrease the webcam. Let me get over here. Add this to the stream. Remove this from the stream. Remove this from the stream. Okay. And now I'm back here with my Haggadah. So you can all see me. Okay, and we've done that. We've talked about that washing. Now, I really want you to. This is a part that I get goose pimples here. Okay, there's certain parts of the Seder that took on whole new meaning for me when I became a believer. Parts of my own heritage that all of a sudden fell into place and made sense in a way they had not made sense before. Understand, Jewish people are not Trinitarian unless they believe in Jesus. Judaism has had a strong, rabbinical Judaism has had a strong reaction to the Trinity. We've done a lot of stuff on the channel about it. Our Jewish polemicists, of whom Tovia Singer would be an example, hate the Trinity with a purple passion. Now, what I want you to see is this is called a matzah tash. Now, the word tash is not Hebrew. The word tash is more Germanic. So, Ashkenazi Jews from Eastern Europe, Germany, and France, they call it a matzah tash. It's one bag with 3 compartments. Now, Jesus didn't have this. This is like from New York via Israel. This is like really cool. Jesus probably had a piece of homespun that was woven through the matzahs. And you can do this. It's not real hard to create. What I've done sometimes when I visit churches is had napkins, set it up like a 3-fold bag, stapled them together. I mean, you can do a lot of stuff. What's important is it's the one bag with 3 compartments. And in each compartment is a piece of matzah. Now I'm going to take the second of the 3. So I'm going to take the second of the one that is 3. Do you see that? I can't see if lights are going on, but when I do this at a church, I sometimes get the lights begin to go on. And so I'm taking the second of the one that is 3, and I want to hold this up to you. Okay, it's bruised and it's pierced. Now, someone at a recent Seder, one of the pastors said, well, did it look exactly like this? And I always like to say, I'm old, but I'm not that old. So I can't tell you it looked exactly like this. It probably was not nicely squared. Okay, this is like courtesy of Manischewitz. It was probably more rounded. Think about how you round out some bread dough. It would have been bruised, though, because it was cooked very quickly. Remember, they had time not for the bread to rise, and they would have cooked it. So they could have munched on it here. No one's doing the bread dough thing. And so it would be bruised. This bruising is just a function of heating unleavened bread at a very high heat so it cannot rise. And the thing for Jewish people is to remember that they had to eat the bread of affliction, the bread of haste, and get out of Egypt. So I've taken the second of the 3 that is 1, which is bruised. It's also pierced. You may not be able to see that, but it's pierced. That's done to help keep it from leavening. This bread will not leaven. I like to say matzah is like dead bread. It will not leaven. So I've taken the second of the 3 that is 1, which is bruised and pierced. The second of the 3 that is 1, which is bruised and pierced, and I break it. So I've broken the second, and it really broke, of the 3 that is 1, which is bruised and pierced, and then I bury it. So I've got white linen here. In a more prosperous Jewish home, you're going to take white linen. Now, unbelieving Jewish people do this every single year. And the rabbis have been asked and come up with silly excuses for why there are 3 matzahs. They are ridiculous. This, what you're thinking, going through your head is the explanation. I mean, just look at the visual here. The second of the 3 that is 1, which is bruised and pierced, is broken and buried. Now, that's all Jesus would have had to do was have a second piece of homespun around and simply put it out of sight, which is what I've essentially done. I've made it not visible. We don't not use stuff in a Seder, so there's this invitation. This is the bread of affliction, which our forefathers ate in the land of Egypt. Let all who are in need come and celebrate the Passover. You don't see that with other Jewish holidays. Here's what I like to say. Evangelism is inviting people to the Lord's Passover, the Lord's ultimate Passover. Isn't that kind of neat? the second cup would be filled. Now, we don't have to fill that second cup because it already is filled. See, we don't have to do that. Now comes the 4 questions. Now we're getting ready to tell the story, and the second cup's going to be used in the story. And so you need to understand that before you tell the story, you got to ask some questions. And so I'm hoping that the hearing is coming through here, okay? Because it's very rare you're going to hear me sing. But I'm going to let you hear how this would be chanted or sung in Hebrew. Ma nishtana halayla hazeh mikol halelot shebechol halelot anu ochlin chametzu matzah halayla hazeh kulo matzah. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we can eat leavened bread, chametz, or matzah, unleavened bread. But on this night, we eat only matzah, and that's what goes on for about 8 days in the diaspora. So my kids have always planned a really not crunchy chametz-built meal, usually before Passover and after Passover, because we get really kind of like chametz withdrawal. Okay. Why is this night different from all other nights? Is the second question. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we eat all kinds of herbs, but on this night, we eat only bitter herbs. We're going to talk about the horseradish. I can already smell it. See, the Lord's using my senses to remind me of the story. You're saying, but wait, Jeff, this is also an herb, is it not? And that's very good, but it's not. It's considered a vegetable. This is the green leafy vegetable. It's not considered an herb, so our only herb is the maror that we're going to talk about later. Why is this night different from all other nights? On all other nights, we don't even dip once. Ceremonially, there's no dipping in other Jewish meals. On this night, we dip twice. The first dipping was the parsley in the salt water. The second dipping has yet to happen. Now we need to keep moving. By the way, this may run a little longer, so I hope you'll hang with me. Now we have to tell the story. Now this is the longest part of the Seder when an Orthodox Jewish person does it. You have the story, you have the rabbinical commentaries on the story. By the way, the 4 questions are not directly answered by the story. The questions are usually asked by the youngest child to keep them engaged. And see, because you don't directly answer the questions from the story, the youngest child and the other children have to really listen hard and figure out things, because we want to pass it on to the next generation. I'm not going to make it as long. Let me point some features out of the story that really speak to some important truths. First of all, the children of Israel went down as approximately 70 people. You'll notice that in Acts, the number is not 70, it's closer to 75. This is not a discrepancy in your Bible. Who was already in Egypt? Joseph and his family. So if you add the Joseph to the ones who came to Egypt, you get the number in Acts. So it's all a matter of how you count. The Egyptians, of course, as we follow the story, took umbrage to the fact that God was prospering Israel. Now, they were supposed to be allowed to go out of the land, but they were not supposed to stay. If you stay where God doesn't want you, you can't expect God's blessings, and you may experience his discipline. They were told the land was theirs. Jacob was given permission during the famine and to be with Joseph. Joseph knew they were supposed to go back. He even says, bring my bones with you when you return and bury me in the land. So Joseph understood the connection, the land promise. And reading Michael Heiser, he brought up some real important, good biblical theology about why have Israel have a land. And I always knew that they were supposed to have a land. And it made sense to me, but there was even deeper thing there. And so they had a land. Ramses ends up dying, but there's another Ramses. Got to understand it was a dynastic title. The children of Israel groaned under the new Pharaoh, who was no better, but was worse than the old Pharaoh. And God says he looked upon their affliction in Exodus 2:24, remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Why do I bring that up? Because when it says God remembered, it doesn't mean God has a memory problem. The word zachor in Hebrew means to remember something, to prepare to act on it or to act on it. It's the idea of remembering something to do something about it. I'm not just remembering where my glasses are. I'm remembering where my glasses are so I can go get them and put them on. And so that's the sort of thing. When God remembered Noah, he wasn't just remembering Noah. He was bringing Noah to mind because there was something going to happen. He was going to take action. Now, I can't pass it up. The rabbis, when they're bad, they're really bad. But when they're good, they're actually good. And even a broken clock is right twice a day. They make an observation that's really cool. They say that when God appeared in the burning bush, it was a thorn bush, and it was as though God was wearing a crown of thorns. You're going to find that in the commentary on Exodus Rabbah 2:5. Now, what's so cool to me is that Jesus is called the Shekinah glory in Hebrews. He is the radiance of his glory, the exact representation of his person. And so I don't know whether that was a thorn bush in Exodus, but God did wear a crown of thorns. The Shekinah glory, which is what's being mentioned in Hebrews, Jesus is the living, walking Shekinah glory. The Shekinah glory did wear a crown of thorns. It might not have been at Exodus. It might have been a little later. Now we get to the plagues where we're going to use the second cup. So I'm going to shift to this matzah because we don't want to get it all full of grape juice. And I want to point out a few things to you. First of all, I do not view God's wrath as opposite to his love. I view them as two sides of the same coin. And so interestingly enough, in Isaiah 28:21, God's wrath is called his strange work. I can find nowhere in the scriptures where God's love is called his strange work. Just have not found it. The other thing you need to know is that Isaiah 19:21 through 23 predicts that there is a day when Egypt will go to Assyria and Assyria will go to Egypt. There will be a highway between them and both will worship the Lord. So the nation that was judged in the Exodus is pictured as worshiping during what I call the millennial kingdom, or what theologians call the millennial kingdom. And so I just want to make those two observations before we get into the plagues. There's a third observation I must make. God says that he will execute in Exodus judgment on all the gods of Egypt. Every one of the plagues is designed against an Egyptian god. So effective was God's judgment at also being used by him in terms of his mercy that a number of Egyptians left with the Israelites. Didn't know that, maybe, but God's judgment is connected to his mercy, and his mercy was demonstrated in the fact that many Egyptians got the message. Let's go through the plagues. Now, for each of the plagues, I'm going to take a little juice out of this second cup, but I haven't told you what the name of this second cup is, have I? There are a few names associated with this second cup. I have always known it as the cup of thanksgiving. It is also known as the cup of judgment. So depending on which Haggadah you have, you may see a difference in that. Don't fret. Sometimes Jewish people have more than one name for something. So I'm going to be taking from the cup of judgment and pouring it out, if you want to look at it that way, or I'm going to be diminishing the cup of thanksgiving because the Egyptians had to suffer. Now, let me go through this. The first plague was dam, which is blood. The second plague was frogs. The third plague was kinim, which is gnats. Avrov, flies. Dever shechin, pestilence. Shechin, boils. Belad is hail. Arba is locusts. Koshech is darkness. And the slaying of the firstborn. Each of these is against a Egyptian deity. They said the river Nile was a god. God made it bleed. That's blood. They worshiped the frog god. I don't know why they worshiped the frog god, but they did. So God said, you want frogs? I'll give you frogs. Be careful of what you worship. They even had a fly god. Really strange. The slaying of the firstborn, because they believed that Pharaoh himself was deity. They worshiped the sun, Ra. God turned the sun off. And so God executed judgment on the false gods of Egypt. Now, if you follow Michael Heiser, he makes a good point that these gods probably had fallen angels operating behind them. I mean, let's face it, fallen angels want to deceive. And so that makes a good deal of sense. The cup associated with this, of course, is I will deliver you from bondage. Now, you can look at it as God doing it in terms of judgment, the cup of judgment, or thanksgiving, because God ended up freeing them or delivering them from bondage. This cup would then be drank. This is the last cup I believe Jesus drank during that meal. I'm not going to be dogmatic about it, but there's a reason for it. As we get to the other cups, I will go through. But there's evidence to support it in Luke 22, 17, and 18. Little sip there. I'm running out of locations for my non-existent cups here. Now, this is a second washing. We're not going to do that. Because really, it didn't get mentioned by the gospel writers because it was just sort of understood. And there's some good conversation going. I can't be at camera 2 and see your conversation, so I'm not ignoring you if you're watching or you're conversing or you're seeing the comments go by. It's just a function of using 2 cameras tonight. Now let's talk about the bitter herbs. This is horseradish. You can use endive, you can use chicory, but why bother? Eastern European Jews are called Ashkenazi Jews from the Table of Nations, not because we're not Jews. That's a Black Hebrew Israelite myth, bad Bible teaching, totally false. Okay? It's where we settled. People were often named, and so since Jews settled there, they're called as the Ashkenazi Jews. Jews are Israelites, so they're the Ashkenazi Israelites. Okay? The other group is the Sephardim. The only ones that, it's an issue of diaspora. Ashkenazi Jews use horseradish. This serves 2 important reasons. It's going to suffice for the bitter herb. It's also going to get rid of any spring cold that you have. Little humor. Now, you think I'm going to eat a whole spoonful of horseradish, but I'm not. Because I'm going to introduce you to the charoset. Now, this stuff is like really good. And if you were to make it before Passover, or don't celebrate Passover, it goes great in pancakes. It's apples, walnuts, grape juice, and cinnamon. It's supposed to look like mortar. I didn't chop it quite as fine. Sephardic Jews will use figs, dates. Try to find figs and dates in Siberia. But apples grow there, walnuts grow there. And so that's what Ashkenazi Jews use. Now, you think I'm going to go ahead and do this. Now, this is the second dipping. Have you ever heard of something called sop? Ever gone to your store and tried to buy a quart of sop? 2 rabbis had an argument over which elements needed to be eaten during the Passover, Hillel and Shammai. They were the rabbis before Jesus' day. In fact, a lot of the questions Jesus is getting answered is about whether he sided with Hillel or he sided with Shammai. Hillel said, well, you need to eat the main elements together. These 3 things. You need to eat the unleavened bread. You need to eat the bitter herbs. You need to eat the lamb. The charoset is sort of included. That's your sop. And so normally you'd have a bowl, and Jesus passed the bowl. And who did Jesus pass the bowl to? Well, John 13 says that after he had dipped in the sop, so he took his, he gave it to Judas Iscariot. That was generally kind of an affectionate gesture. I don't know. Is Jesus reaching out to Judas Iscariot one last time? It says that the devil entered into Judas Iscariot. Let's not let Judas Iscariot off the hook. The devil energized Judas Iscariot to do what Judas Iscariot already was firmly decided to do in his own will. So the devil made me do it does not get you off the hook. Sorry, Flip Wilson, if you know the reference. Now, we don't dip anymore. The FDA does not approve. So in order to make the sandwich, I'm going to take some of the haroset and some of the bitter herbs. Now, you're supposed to take enough of the bitter herbs to produce tears. Why? Because the bitter herbs represent the bitterness of slavery. So I put the haroset on. I'm supposed to take enough of this to produce tears. When I do a Passover Seder, I know who was brave with the horseradish and who wasn't, and who really wanted the haroset and avoiding the horseradish. This is about the bitterness of slavery, but we need to think about this for just a second. We Americans aren't used to being enslaved, are we? Jesus said whoever sins is a slave to it. There's physical slavery and spiritual slavery. And there are a lot of people under the dominion of darkness who do not know the Lord and are not in covenant with God. And they are stuck with the fallen world and the fallen powers behind it. And so there is a slavery. And I'm going to take some of this. Now, I'm not planning to go back on this. And I would take this and I would produce what's called the korech, or the Hillel sandwich. See, Hillel won the argument. Shammai lost, so Hillel gets the sandwich named after him. Now, I'm going to switch here just briefly to camera one. So we're going over to camera one. Go here. And camera one should be here. I'm going to mute the mic on camera two. So hopefully that works for you. Okay. Slam and a grammatical question. And I need to fix my mic. My mic fell. Don't know why, but it did. So my Yeti is having problems tonight. Let me just take a minute or two during the meal. I often answer questions. I'm not going to take a lot of questions because this presentation itself is rather long. She's got a thing about the story of the Megid, and then Berchot HaMazon is the blessing after the meals, and the fourth for Hillel. I've never heard that before, and you would not say blessing after meals until you've had the meal, which you kind of end up doing previously. So I'm going to do like the guitar student. It's good that you find other sources, but you're going to get my take and 15 years and then a lifetime of being a part of this, even before I was saved. So I do love the comment by Slam, Yiddish. And I said kind of German. Understand that Yiddish is based pretty Germanically, except it uses Hebrew characters. So she's just trying to keep me a little honest here. Talented homeschoolers. The cup was drank 4 times. Excellent. No real questions on the board, except for one about the plural. So is you plural? I'd have to have the text up. And so I don't have that at the moment. I do want to take a minute or two. This is when Chosen People missionaries do their advertisement. Okay. It's just that way. And I've gotten so used to doing it that I'm probably going to try to stick a banner or two up. Or maybe not. Okay. Oh, yeah, there's the banners. Let's just put that up. There's where you can find us. But if you're new to the channel and you have an interest, you can just go there. That works quicker. We do have a website. Check it out. There's some more stuff on there. And then, of course, you can support us through Patreon. And usually my great moderators, Elizabeth and Nate, end up doing that for me. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to banners and take that off. And, now that I've kind of done my thing there, let me take the Patreon off and hide it. We can get back to things. I'm looking for any questions that might appear. We might have a few after, which is okay. But even if we don't, we're going to go back to our story here because really We've used 2 of the cups, but we haven't talked about the cup that Jesus used. There are how many left? You know? Great. Michael Radelnik was one of my professors. He is brilliant. I have 2 of his books. And his son was excellent. I helped with the leadership of a program they had that was taking young people and having them witness. It was STEP for youth. And I had his son, brought my son down, was allowed to help, actually had his son. So his son was a really neat young man, still is. Just haven't seen him for a lot of years. Okay, we're going to switch back to camera 2. And to do that, I need to add this to stream. Unmute myself. There we go. And we are back at camera 2. Let's talk about that third cup. Okay, now there are 2 things. After the meal, the kids go searching for the afikomen. This didn't happen in the upper room. But I got to admit, I was so thrilled the year I found it. And it's redeemed for a silver coin. Now, in my day, that was a quarter. That was worth a little more. So there was 1 year that I beat my female cousins out, and I found the afikomen. And so the child would bring this back to the table and see the second of the 3 that is won, which is bruised and pierced and was buried, is now resurrected. Now, if you're wondering, this is called the afikomen. Now, remember, we've eaten the meal. We've eaten the ceremonial foods. I know this doesn't seem like much of a dessert, unless it's coated with chocolate. But the word afikomen is often related to the Greek word dessert. I mean, that's the way I understood it. However, my Greek professor said that if you understand the Greek, it could be afikomai from the word afikomai, which means I come. I found that fascinating. Because if indeed this representative matzah is resurrected, Jesus is going to return. And so I found that kind of interesting. This is the bread of the bread and cup. So let's just review. The second of the 3 that is won, which is bruised and pierced, was buried, and is resurrected, is the bread. This is my body. This is representative of my body. Think of what a great representation this would be for those Jewish disciples. So I'm going to put this down. I'm going to put it because we need to talk about the cup. What's the third cup? Now, the third cup is the cup of redemption. The promise is, I will redeem you. Now, you have to think like the disciples for just a few minutes here. You have the benefit of knowing about a first and second coming, but the Hebrew scriptures never use the term first and second coming. You have prophecies of a suffering servant and prophecies of a king. How are they going to reconcile them? They are not prepared for Jesus's passion. They're not prepared at all for Jesus's passion. Jesus is trying to get a message to them before his passion. And so he takes the third cup. Now, the promise echoing through their heads when he holds up this third cup is, I will redeem you. Clear idea of redemption in their head. And Jesus says, this is the blood of the new covenant. That's Jeremiah 31 through 33. And he ties the Exodus 6 promise, I will redeem you, to Jeremiah 31 through 33, and his upcoming passion, the spilling of his blood. Normally, you would go ahead and take of that. Now, I don't think Jesus needed to take of that because Jesus didn't need redemption. And so I think it's highly possible that when you look at Luke 22, where it says he will not drink of the fruit of the vine, it's highly possible that that's in reference to the second cup and that he's just passing this. Not going to be dogmatic, but it seems to strike me sort of that way. Here's the bread of the bread and cup, the afikomen. Here's the third cup, I will redeem you, the cup of redemption. There's your bread and cup. This is not communion. This is just me following through. I'm putting the matzah on here to crown that as the bread and cup. Okay? There is another cup here. It had no place on the table. It's Elijah's cup. It's usually filled with wine or grape juice. It is connected to the fact that Jews connected Malachi 3 with Malachi 4. So they connected the forerunner with Elijah. Now, I think Elijah will come, but Jesus ends up saying, in terms of the forerunner you're expecting, John the Baptist fills the bill. And so we have the combination there. Again, Jews don't have a first and second coming. So prophecies that are close to each other that refer to that first coming and second coming were often melded together. And so that often happened. What would happen is the second time you're going to hear me saying, the door would be open. Elijah would be invited in. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Tishbechi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Hagiladi. Simply inviting Elijah in. My grandfather used to use wine. And so basically there was a little evaporation. No one told me about evaporation, but Elijah never showed up. We covered the third cup and grape juice. There is a fourth cup. And I need to talk to you about this fourth cup. This fourth cup is the cup of completion. I will take you to me for a people. We're still awaiting some things to happen. And so the cup of completion really hasn't happened yet. I think it looks beyond even our time to, you could say we're pretty close, but this is a cup of completion. I like to point out to people that the language in the Bible is sin is spiritual adultery with Israel. Over and over again. Check out the book of Hosea. When you sin, you're stepping out on God. That's essentially it. There is a day when God will take us to himself as his people. We already are his people, but the realization where he takes us to himself. Lakach. And it's covenantal. Isaac took a wife. It's often used in covenantal terms. Not always, but occasionally. I'm going to go ahead and do this because it's ceremonially natural to go ahead. There's always the Nirtzah. Jewish people always tell God that they've done it. We've done it. The only thing that's significant to the Nirtzah for me is the fact that the Nirtzah includes some language that is really, really neat. The Nirtzah says the Paschal Seder is done, its customs and laws fulfilled. Grant grace that we, each one, may do as thou hast willed. O pure one enthroned on high, rise up the low, make free the captives. Think back to Jesus's words in Luke about this being fulfilled in your hearing. Plant on Zion in thy love, thy vine branch nigh to thee. The vine branch language in the Old Testament is Israel. It goes back to the song of the vineyard. But look at the way Jesus turns things around. Instead of Israel being the vine branch, you are. I am the vine, you are the branches. My Father is the vine dresser. He is borrowing right from Isaiah's song of the vineyard. And instead of us going through Israel to enter into covenant with God, or entering into Israel to enter with covenant with God, we do so through Jesus. Jesus is saying, instead of Israel being the vine, I am now the quintessential vine. And you connect with God through me, not through identification with Israel's theocracy. You see how important that is, especially for the disciples to understand that. And so that's the Nirtzah. Of course, the disciples went out. They sang Psalm 115 through 18, which is highly messianic. So they were singing about Messiah when they traveled out with Messiah. I'm going to switch back to camera 1 because we're not going to need camera 2 anymore. There's some good conversation going on. I'm going to put the main on. I'm going to close this and I'm going to leave that on. Excellent. Some good conversation. We pretty much figured that out. Slam has got it pretty good. There is no finding of Moses's body, and there is no body with Elijah. He's translated. So that's basically the kind of thing is the translation there where Elijah's taken out. As far as him still being alive, well, every dead person is alive somewhere. But the point is that Elijah's translated, and he is the great law enforcer. That's the other reason. Moses is the great law giver. The prophets were law enforcers, and Elijah is considered the chief of the prophets, although he was not a writing prophet. And so he's kind of the chief law enforcer. He's always associated with a really high status as a prophet. So that's the reason that Jewish thinking would probably allow for that. It is great to have Air Church here. If you didn't see the beginning of this, join us. Go back, look at it. Recommend it to your friends. I mean, it's a chance for them to have a modified Christ in the Passover. Sorry about the sound issues as we bounced between mics. We really kind of pressed the technology a little tonight, but that's okay. And I see folks kind of dropped in and out, and that's kind of the way things go. Definitely go ahead and do that if you missed it. And I'm glad to have you all aboard. And this is modified, a little different with 2 cameras, but we made it work. And so that's good. And someone said they also had sound issues. Elijah was a Bible version of the Flash when he ran ahead. I like that. So I've got another, well, actually the Flash was DC. But that's pretty neat. Oh, hey, and somebody on Facebook, probably Jimmy Ivy. Thank you, Jimmy, for that thumbs up. I never saw that happen before. That's really cool. So that's really exciting. Thank you, talented homeschoolers, for joining us for this. I hope you'll join us again for other things. Well, I don't know about you, but I'm going to have to clean all this up and get ready. We'll do our family Seder probably Sunday, but it was great to do this kind of pre-Passover thing. And I don't know. I'm looking for anything else here just to see what's there. And okay. I'm doing a lot of I think what I'm going to do is sign off here. There don't seem to be any questions. Jack, it was great to have you here. I think it was Brother Steve, had seen one of these because I did it for our church during COVID last year because they had no Good Friday program. So, and I'm going to put a nice, you're welcome. Now, once I disconnect, I have all of 30 seconds to see any comments you put in the YouTube. And then YouTube shuts down. So you guys can put some stuff. And I'm going to put, you're welcome to 2 folks here. I know that many of you also enjoyed it. I got to definitely get a you're welcome to Jimmy and to Slam RN. Sorry there. I'm not typing so well today. Let me put this in here. Hoping this works. Question about group of believers in your area. I don't know where your area is, but I'm also going to include Jimmy. It was so good to have her here on the YouTube. So, Ivy, get in there. Can I? Let me get this up here. There's a question about a group of Jewish believers in my area. Are there churches with a majority of Jewish believers in them? Yes, there are some. Chicagoland, yes, there are several in the Chicagoland area. I remember Olive Tree, which was in the suburbs. What you can do is go to the Chosen People website. There are two staff people that are connected, both of whom I know. I'm thinking of, man, I'm getting a brain cramp. Must be the time at night. But there are at least two staff members there. So go to the website and hit the Chicago branch. You should be able to find our branches and hit the Chicago branch. And you should see two. And I can picture him and I know him real well. Roy Schwartz. And then there's Ryan Karp. And I believe they're in touch with a Messianic congregation. So if you go to their website and you hit the branch, you can even email them and get some contact. I grew up around Chicago. I grew up in Des Plaines. And then before we moved out to Des Plaines, I grew up on Devon and Sealy, which was an old Jewish neighborhood. So it's good to have another Chicagoan on there, Greg, and glad you joined us. Greg says he's not Jewish. That's absolutely fine. That's great. I love my Gentile brothers and sisters. We are all grafted into the same olive tree. So, fantastic. And by the way, have a Chicago dog for me, Greg. I miss them. I haven't had a Chicago dog for a while. I had one when the Cubbies won. So, and there were no Chicago dogs that we found in the airport when we were traveling through flying to Vermont. So I'm Chicago dog deprived. So have a nice beef Chicago dog for me. All righty. Well, and Jimmy says thanks. And, you know, I already said you're welcome, but that was just fun. I'm going to go ahead and say Erev Tov, because where I am, it's Erev Tov, which is good evening. Where you are, it might be Lila Tov, which is good night, because the Chicago period would be closer to about 9 o'clock. So if it's Lila Tov by you, great. If you're in Australia, wow, you're way past Lila Tov. So I will see you again, and I will be posting about next week, but we'll probably continue dealing with mediation. I do want to go ahead and talk about something. I don't have a copy, but I want to let you know that the dissertation that I did is available. We're working on making it available on Amazon. Let me know. Some people have that you're interested. We'll do a pre-order sort of thing. Get that up on Amazon, and you can see my actual dissertation, which I completed. So I'm pre-advertising the dissertation. When I don't have the tables here, I can put a nice hard copy up there and let you guys see it. Blessings on all of you. And if you tune in later, God bless you too.